Ever since the first awakenings of human consciousness, we've wondered about communicating with the forces of creation. In the Bible, Jacob dreams of a ladder connecting heaven and earth. In early human societies, the responsibility of contacting the divine, the supernatural, belonged to the shaman, witch doctor, medicine man. The search for these individuals had brought me to Mexico, whereby being a monitoring cactus, I had real chance of seeing for myself the hidden world of the gods. I'm here in the Sierra Madre of northwest Mexico in order to visit the Huichol people, whose shaman eat an hallucinogenic cactus in order to see this normally invisible dimension. And what makes these people particularly special is that once a year the shaman leads ordinary people on this journey. I'm hoping that this year I'm going to be able to join them as they come face to face with their gods. Every year, groups of Huichol pilgrims leave their homes in the Sierra for the arid desert of Huiracuta, a round trip of up to 1,000 miles. This forbidding wasteland is an Eden to the Huichols, a land of gods where their ancestors, the ancient ones, once lived. As long as the Huichols continue to honour the gods and make the pilgrimage, the sun will rise and the rain will fall. If they fail, their world and ours will cease to exist. The key to this relationship is an hallucinogenic cactus called Peyote. Only when it's been found and eaten in the desert will the pilgrims be able to communicate with the gods. Once, the earth was cold, dark and barren. The mother creator of all things, our grandmother Takutsi, told the ancient ones about the Peyote, which would teach them how to bring the rains that enabled the crops to grow and life to flourish. Peyote brings on the ecstatic state necessary to speak with the gods, but it also has its own power. It revealed to the ancient ones that they were part of an interdependent universe. The visions brought on by eating peyote transport pilgrims today back to a time and place where the ancestors could communicate with everything else in creation. The Peyote pilgrimage reenacts the original journey to Huiracuta, made by the ancient ones thousands of years ago. Until recently, the pilgrimage was made on foot or by mule, but that's been practically impossible since the 1960s, when a major highway was built through a key part of the route. Once, the Huichols owned all the land between the desert and the mountains, but they've been pushed into ever more remote areas by first the Aztecs, then 500 years ago by the Spanish, and most recently by the Mexicans, or mestizos. Today, the Huichols live in small communities spread across the mountains, connected to the outside world only by dirt roads and footpaths. The rugged terrain helped the Huichols preserve a way of life that's remained largely untouched since before the Spanish arrived, although the loggers and their trucks are eating their way up even these steep slopes. Though the Huichols are now settled here, they believe that once they lived as hunters in the desert. Peyote designs are often woven into the clothes they wear. Since there isn't enough food to sustain them all year, many Huichols are forced to leave home to work in tobacco plantations on the coast. Despite the onslaught of missionaries and evangelists, and the influence of Mexican schools and hospitals, most Huichols still prefer to maintain a distance between themselves and Mexican society. I'd been introduced to a remote village considered one of the most traditional of all Huichol communities. Life revolves around the growing and harvesting of maize, the basis of Huichol diet. Maize, vital to physical sustenance, is closely associated with peyote, the sacred cactus. The peyote hunt can only take place during the months between the maize harvest and the sowing of the next season's crop. Matsuo, an apprentice Murakami, or shaman of the Huichols, was in charge of the pilgrims this year as part of his initiation. This would be his 6th pilgrimage, but he reckoned he'd have to make the journey at least twice more before the gods taught him enough for him to be initiated as a full Murakami. Like many societies which still have medicine men, for the Huichols, nature is indivisible from the divine, and the landscape is full of sacred power. Wolves are important animals because they're supposed to have taught the Huichols how to hunt. Matsuo took me to a shrine dedicated to them.
Los cantadores dicen nomás que este dice que el compañero del juego, los lobos. Entonces aquí lo tiene su peñasquito para que dejan ahí la su frente y sus flechas y su velita.
It's impossible to say just how many gods the Huichols have, because every bush, every stone is imbued with sacred energy. Grandmother Takutsi gave everything a life force, a soul, and humans have a responsibility to respect her creation. That creation, and the Huichols' relationship to it, is often depicted in yarn paintings. The most important animal is the deer, our elder brother Kayumari, the intermediary spirit between humans and the gods. Only where Kayumari treads does the peyote grow. Given the responsibility of maintaining harmony between the gods and humans is the Murakami, who is chosen by the gods for this role.
Porque nosotros vamos yendo a visitarlo y dejar las ofrendas, entonces ya ellos ya nos dicen cómo qué es lo que va a pasar y si fue bien o no fue bien o faltó algo y qué pasó y qué cómo vamos a andarlo. Y vamos a andar bien, o va a llover bien, o no, ahí es nada más, y por eso vamos ahí.
Led by Matsuo and 3 full Murakamis who'd had dreams telling them to begin, we set off across the Sierra. Those left behind in the village would keep fires burning during our absence, and in their bags the pilgrims carried the prayers of their families, in the form of offerings to be left at sacred sites en route. We travelled in single file and in strict order, representing the gods, or allocated specific roles, such as teacher, policeman, or judge. In effect, we were recreating a mini-society for the duration of the pilgrimage. The most senior Murakami was Grandfather Fire, Tatewari, and he led the group. Behind him was Matsuo, Tatewari's assistant. With us were 3 people on their first pilgrimage. They'd spend much of the time blindfolded, since the beauty of sacred sites along the way had the power to blind them.
It's getting hotter and hotter as we descend into the lowlands, and really it feels like we've left a fortress, that Sierra that's kept the Spanish and more recently the mestizos at bay.
But there was evidence everywhere of how times had changed. A 100 years ago, this was thick forest which they owned, but now the Huichols have to negotiate the fences and cattle herds of Mexican ranchers. This set a pattern for the rest of the pilgrimage. Many of the sacred sites on the way are now on land owned by farmers who refuse access to them. Pancho, representing Tatewari, Grandfather Fire, was one of the most respected Murakamis in the region, and the success or failure of the pilgrimage rested on his and Matsuo's shoulders. That night we camped at the foot of the mountains. Ever since we'd started, the camps had been organised in a meticulous fashion. Trees and scrub were cut for firewood, and 2 fires aligned to the rising and setting sun. The larger of the 2 is Tatewari, a god held in great affection by the Huichols because he was the first to allow his powers to be harnessed by humans. It was Tatewari who told humans where to find the place the sun was born and how to ensure he rose again after each night. To this day, the Huichols greet the rising sun with candles and prayers in thanks for the blessing of light and heat that he brings. The first morning out of the mountains, and as always Tatawari was asked for blessings before we set off on the bus which was waiting for us. When the pilgrimage was made on foot, it took between 3 and 4 months to complete. Now, if they can afford it, pilgrims hire a truck or bus, which cuts the journey time to a month. Before they get near the desert and the sacred Peyote, the pilgrims must prepare themselves thoroughly. Wirakuta is seen as a paradise where the divisions of human life, man, woman, old, young, life, death, do not exist. It's as much a state of mind as a physical location. In order to enter it, the pilgrims have to be pure. We'd kept our food intake to a minimum since we'd left the village, but everyone in the group also has to confess all the sexual sins they've committed since the last pilgrimage. It wasn't something I was looking forward to. For those Huichols on the pilgrimage for the first time, it's even harder. At a particular sacred site, at the border between the states of Jalisco and Zacatecas, the primeros must confess everyone they've ever had sex with. That a road runs straight through seems to matter little to them. Walking on ahead, the Marakames and elders separated themselves from the rest of us, who waited to see which primero was called first. After confessing and being symbolically beaten for every sin, the primero is led in a dance that represents the original journey of the ancient ones. The whoops and cries of the press gang represent the howling of wolves and are intended to lighten the serious business of confession. As the only woman on the pilgrimage, this primero must have been feeling the pressure.
Entonces, los peyoteros tienen miedo porque es necesario confesar.
No, para nosotros ya no. Cuando es la primera vez sí hay un poquito de tensión.
Sí.
Pero ya segunda vez ya no.
Okay, es mucho tiempo. ¿Hay muchas confesiones o...?
No, la temperatura del Wirrárica es muy,
Sí.
mucho, muy alto. En mujeres pues es más.
Sí.
Sí, pues.
¿Por qué?
Pues la temperatura, digo, el calor sube demasiado. Y...
Okay, lining up again.
Pero vale, no te vas a escapar tú también.
Sí.
They're coming for you now.
Oh no.
I hoped I got away with not confessing, but unfortunately, Matsuo said everyone else, including me, would have to confess that night. For the pilgrims, it's a crucial stage in the process of preparing to meet their ancestors and gods. It's vital there are no secrets between the pilgrims, and that everyone is brought together through a shared experience before they taste the peyote. If anyone lies or shows animosity towards anyone else, the peyote will find them out and subject them to torment in their visions. The process of shedding the trappings of everyday life had been underway ever since we'd set off. Every spare moment we'd had, one of the elders made us memorize new names for everything around us, so that we could leave the old world behind as we approached Wirakuta.
Senora que te tierra. Ah, Santa Catarina que te tierra. Senora que te tierra. Y tú que te tierra. Piriguari que te tierra.
Everything around us is being renamed. The earth is now going to be called the sea. The ficus trees, they're going to be called the whales that swim in the sea. Pigs are now going to be called hippopotamuses. And so it goes on. It's a way of detaching us from the world that we've known, so that we're free to enter a different world, the domain of the gods.
Every year this is done differently, and the pilgrims are required to remember hundreds of names perfectly.
No, que hacemos
más o menos hecho ahí como que me naca no te recaes pero si para estudiar nada más que
As evening approached, the camp was made ready, and everyone fanned out to cut firewood. The preparations were as efficient as ever, each pilgrim carrying out the task he'd been allocated since the start. There was a Minister of Culture, whose job it was to make sure all the rubbish was collected. A man who made sure the wood was exactly the right length. Even someone to take the bags from the marakamis. The only thing missing was someone to cook. We were still on minimal rations, a few tortillas and oranges, when we had time to eat. Along with the renaming of the world and the confessing of our sins, this was another way the pilgrims separated themselves from their mortal state. The fire god Tatawari is one of the most important Huichol gods, and is considered, like all the gods, to be a great Marakami. Tatawari knows whether the pilgrims are telling the truth when they confess, and we'd have to confess to him before telling the Marikamis about our sexual sins. The affection with which the Huichols regard Tatewari reflects their past as desert-living hunters. In the scorched wastes, it was the fire that warmed the cold nights, cooked the food, and provided safety from desert animals.
These fires are cherished in a way I've never ever seen around the world. They're lit by a flint which was brought from the place where fire was said to have been born. Sticks are laid on carefully, always facing west to east. And around the fire are placed white sticks, and these are guardians for the main log of the fire.
Ana inutiu na pagata ana idine nang kusane te kari kata to kari kata tang kusane tam ga LT am ka mo po wata uyen ag as gente ag yesa de po wala animo todo el mundo le mo yesa ag po wata uyen.
Late that night, the build-up to the confessions began. The offerings brought from the village were laid out. Then Pancho, the head Marikami, began to pray to the gods, calling on them to witness what we were doing in their honor.
This prayer's been going on for 3 hours now. Just like all the other shamans I've met, the Marikami have this extraordinary ability to summon energy from somewhere. But not only do they have to be equipped with these powers of stamina, but they also have a duty to all those here to lead their souls safely through this experience and back home again. And not only that, but they have a duty to the gods that they call to do the right thing by them. And if they fail, then, well, people say they become sorcerers, and their powers are turned against them and against their own people. I've been trying to work out what I've got to confess, and naturally it isn't all that much. However, it turns out they're rather expecting me to name all my former girlfriends, all those scores of them. Anyway, I've been walking around wondering what to say in my confession, and I bumped into a lot of people standing around the fire, and they were just doing exactly the same, wondering whether they should mention someone or other's sister and someone else's mother. But for people living in a tight community, not easy.
As the most senior pilgrim, apart from the Marikamis, Matsuo was the first to confess. He started by confessing to Tatewari, then to the Marikamis, who are the gods' mortal representatives. It was early morning by the time my turn came round. It was an uncomfortable moment, but unavoidable if I was going to be a full member of the group.
Okay. Mi primera novia fue Patricia de México.
Ah, de México. Qué bueno.
Muy buena.
Mexicano.
Muy bonita.
Hey, muy bonito, pero pobre.
No, rica. Mucho dinero. Y después otra inglesa se llama Joe. Y después otra se llama Charlotte, con un carro bonito. Y después hay otra de la India, se llama Chita. Otra bonita también. Muy bonita.
Ni modo.
Modelo. Exactamente. Y después hay Luis. Y tal vez hay dos otros, pero no recuerdo sus nombres.
Está fácil.
Bueno. Para que te quiera el tachaguarí y el sole. Te llamo a motivando porque
The next morning, I found I could remember a few more girlfriends' names, which had somehow escaped me when confronted by the Marakamis. I was worried I wouldn't be pure enough to eat the peyote safely. But the mood in the camp was very different. The confessions had helped bring us together, and I was suddenly taken fully into the group. We were almost ready to face the desert and the eating of the sacred peyote. Very soon I'd get my chance to see the realm of the gods.